My whole career has been spent in recruitment. I operate no less than 7 medical recruitment companies across England and South Africa. And my passion as a whole has always been about people and service. I founded my company, the A24 Group, in 1996, and I'm still operating this business today and have headquarters both in Cape Town and in the UK. My husband, Nick, has a passion for boats, and that is basically how we came across Benguela Cove, which was my entry into the hospitality business. We quickly fell in love with the estate and we became homeowners, and that was in December 2013. The estate wasn't 2010 actually. The estate wasn't performing well, and the opportunity to acquire the whole of Benguela Cove came up in December 2013, which we did. We acquired the whole residential, urban, vineyards and olive groves from the developer. That left us as the new developer of this beautiful piece of paradise, and we knew nothing about wine apart from enjoying the odd glass or two ourselves. But to cut a long story short, we developed a winery, tasting room facilities, children facilities, and Benguela Cove has become a destination for those that enjoy good food and a home for those that are lucky enough to live here. The farm itself is 200 hectares and the vineyards are 70 hectares. And as you can imagine, we produce a lot of wine. And that needed us to develop a new sales strategy to sell this wine. And this took us to England. In 2016, Nick and I purchased Manning's Heath Golf Club, a beautiful quintessential English property set in West Sussex in England. It had 2 champions. The club had absolutely everything that we needed to set up the perfect tasting room and facilities for Benguela Cove. It had liquor licenses, car parking, great facilities, thirsty golfers, and so on. We rebranded as the Manning's Heath Golf and Wine Estate, the first in England, and we took the opportunity to reduce one of our courses from 18 holes to 9, and we planted varietals conducive to producing English sparkling wine. So together with Benguela Cove, we had our hands completely full. But, and I say but, one day my son Adam asked me to come and look at a house he was thinking of buying. Adam had moved from South Africa to England with his family to run Manning's Heath for me. And I was driving back and I spotted a for sale sign out the corner of my eye. And there was Leonardslee. I'd absolutely never heard of this place before. The property was completely overgrown and uncared for. And I discovered that it had been sold 10 years earlier, and that the owner had just left it and had fallen to rack and ruin, and eventually had gone into the hands of the liquidators. It was difficult to see what was there. The mansion house, when you pushed back the doors, had water running down the walls. There were huge mushrooms growing full of mold. There were deer and wallabies running free on the estate, but animal protection orders were about to be slapped on the estate as nobody had cared for the animals and so forth. So it was a horrific state. Behind a large squeaky door, we found a dolls museum that was absolutely fantastic. It had been protected and it had humidifiers in the ceiling. But once we took ownership, we discovered that it was literally weeks away from being destroyed as they were starting to fail. There's pictures here of this dolls museum. It was created as a replica of a Victorian village, and it is something really stunning. The lady that created it worked tirelessly on this, and you know, it's one of the most magnificent examples. I know that Mary said when she went there, she spent hours and hours enthralled with the dolls museum. So back to the gardens. I mean, the gardens themselves were impossible to walk in. They were unsafe from years of neglect. I couldn't even look at the gardens before I bought them. You couldn't get down there. I was told that the original gardening team loved the place so much that even once the previous owners stopped paying them, they all still came to work for as long as possible to try and protect the gardens. So it's amazing sort of stories behind it. I discovered that so many people in the community of West Sussex had strong ties and roots with Leonardslee. And very much in the heart of the county itself. People, grandparents, we've got in the shed, in one of the garden sheds, there's a list of men that went to war in the First World War who never returned. So it's got so many different aspects of it. I was once asked, you know, what I thought when I opened, you know, went into the space for the first time, and I described it as being an amazing sleeping beauty. That when you hacked back all the vines and all the, you know, the bushes, it just transformed into this amazing place. The restoration of the gardens took approximately 2 years, and we were told that it certainly was one of the largest garden restoration projects in England and possibly Europe. So it's been a very significant project as a whole. The restoration, Stephen will talk in detail to you about that. You know, he's very passionate about this, and we're very lucky to have him. We opened the doors of Leonardslee in March 2019, and in line with the other owners of the estate who'd been plant collectors from all over the world, we decided to plant vineyards. And, you know, one of the thoughts was that if the soils could produce amazing rhododendrons, imagine what they could do for our vines. So very much Jack and the Beanstalk. We actually planted England's first pinotage vineyards in there, so a bit of South Africa into England, which again would complement our foray into English sparkling wines. Other standout moments for us include our Michelin star, which we awarded in October 19 for our restaurant Interlude, which is situated in the Mansion House at Leonardslee. Our South African chef, Jean Delport, who operated our fine dining restaurant in Somerset West, moved to England with me as I told him that I thought there would be no other place like Leonardslee Gardens. John is an outstanding fine dining chef, and his whole menu is inspired from the gardens of Leonardslee, where he forages for his menu. The stars were definitely aligned at the right time. We had the perfect chef, the perfect venue, and luckily Michelin agreed with us. Our journey, of course, at Leonardslee has only just begun. We're only 1 year in, and we've been shut for several months, although we have recently reopened to the public, obviously practicing great social distancing, and the gardens, being a huge area, are very safe for people to come. And I think it becomes very poignant and clear that, you know, how important our open spaces and areas that we can escape and be proud of. So for us now, it's about conservation, looking after the gardens and preserving them for the future generations to come. I would like to hand over to our head gardener, Stephen Herrington, who's actually down in the gardens at Leonardslee this evening, and he will take you on a magical journey around the gardens. Thank you.
Hi there. Yeah, so I'm joining you from Leonardslee, down by the lakes, down by the engine house. It's been a bit of a mixed day today. Been a bit of rain, a bit windy. Just now, most of my notes flew into the lake, so I was wading around the lake, just pulling those out of the lake. So, but yeah, I'd like to take you on a journey through Leonardslee, talking about the restoration as well. I started at Leonardslee in September last year, so I missed the initial restoration, but it's an ongoing restoration. It's going to take a decade at least to restore this garden back to the splendour they were before they shut to the public. After a long time of neglect, a lot of plants take over, and it takes a long time to put that back to how it should be. So we've got a few years of restoration ahead of us, but what an exciting project to be involved in. And I just want to take you through a tour of the garden and talking about the restoration, a little bit about the history as well. So I'm really hoping it doesn't rain. There is a few black clouds in the sky, but I'm sure we'll get there. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. There we go. So Leonardslee is famous for its rhododendron collections and its spring colour. But there's a lot of interest throughout the year at Leonardslee. So we're going through and building on that. So we want a garden that has all year round interest, but obviously showcases in the spring, but also in the autumn as well. So we want our visitors to see us the whole year round and enjoy this spectacular garden. So the garden is 240 acres, and this map here just shows the outline of the estate. The original estate used to be around 1,000 acres when it was originally owned by the Loderi family. And it's quite funny, if you go to the back of the estate here, right up by the top, at the back of the woodland, you look over the fence in the farmers' fields, there's lots of cedar of Lebanon's trees and huge, big, stately trees, which were a famous Victorian planting. And the farmers have just kind of ploughed round them. So it's really interesting to see how the estate would have carried on. So the garden is grade 1 listed, which is the highest listing you can get for a garden, and also the same listings apply to houses as well. So our house is grade 2 listed, but the garden is grade 1 listed, so which means it's really, really important. It has such a famous plant collection here. It's the whole aspect of the garden as well that makes it grade 1 listed. So there's a team of 17 gardeners and tree surgeons that maintain the garden. So, you know, it sounds quite a lot. There's a lot of restoration work to do and a lot of trees to maintain as well. So it's a good team, and some of them have been here since the beginning of the restoration as well. So it's always good to chat to them. They've always got lots of information to tell me. This picture here shows the estate just before the Second World War. This picture was taken by a plane. And it's very wooded here, but there was a big storm in the UK in 1987, which meant a lot of these trees came down in the 87 storm. But the garden generally hasn't changed from this layout here. And this picture here shows the estate now. This picture was taken April last year, but you can see all the spring colour through there. And in the back top corner there, just get a laser pointer. In the top corner there in the screen, this is where the vineyard is at the moment. I think this picture was taken just before it was planted. But this gives you an idea. This is just the area around the house, and there's the Italian mansion there. Here is the rock garden here. And then you head down into the valley, into the estate. So the garden is set in a valley. It's set in a valley that goes like this, which is perfect for growing rhododendrons. All that cold air sweeps down from the top into the valley. So actually, if you come down here in the winter, in the mornings, it's about 1 degree, 2 degrees colder down in the valley here. So all that cold air sweeps down, protecting the rhododendrons. But also, it's a real pocket for rain as well. So it keeps moist in here. So it's perfect for rhododendrons. It really kind of mimics how they grow in the Himalayas, through Asia, China. So it's a perfect setting. So here, this is a picture of Sir Edmund Loderi, who he was really the key, the kind of main guy who kind of organised the estate and started planting up. So he was born in 1849 and he died in 1920. So he was here for around 30 years of his life, and he was a real collector. So he really evolved the garden to what you see today, and the other generations of the Loderi family have added to it, but we're still adding to it today as well. So there's lots of future plans for replanting and establishing new collections. So gardening is forever evolving. But he loved to collect rhododendrons, and he signed up to collect a trip all around the world to the new plant hunters of in the 1900s, going out and collecting those plants and bringing them back to the UK. But he liked to collect animals as well. So there was beavers in the garden. We have wallabies still here in the gardens, antelopes, mountain goats, kangaroos. So he was a definite collector. So I want to take you on a tour of the gardens. And so, as you saw from the map that I showed you earlier, this is our famous rock garden, which is at the top of the estate. So this is a picture here of when the rock garden was first planted in 1900. So it looks completely different to this now. It it was originally built to really house alpines, but over the years, I'll show you some other pictures in a minute, it's evolved to be a rhododendron collection in there. But this was built by Pullman & Sons, which were the famous rock garden designers of the time. If you wanted a rock garden built, you went to them. They built the one at Buckingham Palace, they built the one at Wakehurst Place, just down the road. They built them across the country. They were the go-to rock garden designers of the time. Now, what's really quite funny about our rock garden, if you come and visit and have a wander around, there's two different types of rock in there. There's real sandstone rock, which is quarried from the estate here, but also there's a special rock called pulamite, which was their special recipe. It was their secret recipe. They made a mixture of cement and sand and other products to make fake rock. And actually, if you go in there, unless you've got your eye in, it's really hard to tell the difference. They made this amazing rock garden in there. So this is the rock garden. In 2017, Penny was just telling you about the restoration and the state the garden was in. And this is some early pictures. So the rock garden was completely overgrown and everything was overgrowing each other. So there used to be a team of around 6 or 7 gardeners that maintained Leonardslee, and the one gardener used to work just in the rock garden here. And at one point when it was closed, it went down just to one gardener for 240 acres. So you can imagine the estate that the garden was in. So a long process, which we're still doing now, and we're doing for many years, is finding those plants, making sure they're labelled as well. We've got a big program of cataloguing all the plants through the gardens here, making sure they're all labelled, so people visiting us know what the plants are. They can ask us questions around them. Putting it onto a plant database and mapping them, and making sure we propagate those plants as well. So as I said, some of them are so rare and unusual, you won't find them in many other gardens in the UK. So that picture there shows just as it came into the gardens in 2017, all completely overgrown, and behind that is a water feature and a pond. And this is it now, completely restored. So I took this picture at the beginning of the week here, and you can see the water feature has been restored there. So we've done a lot of work in the rock garden over the last 6 months. There was a huge amount of conifers that were planted in the 70s as dwarf conifers, but they didn't stay that dwarf. They were somewhere around 30 to 40 foot when we felled them. So they'd grown absolutely huge. So I'm always a bit suspect about that term dwarf, because things don't stay dwarf forever. So all those trees were felled, let so much more light into the rock garden, which allowed us to really see what we had there, allowed us to replant a lot more species rhododendrons and azalea rhododendrons through there as well. Allowed us to redo a lot of the rock work in there, and resurface the paths as well. So the paths have got a heritage gravel now put through them. So it's pretty much restored now. We've got a bit more herbaceous planting to do in there, but it looks absolutely fantastic in there. So different to what it looked like before. This is a picture into the rock garden here. You've got the azalea. These are Japanese azalea type rhododendrons going out the rock garden. So another picture of the rock garden here. This is before we'd restored the paths, but you can see how much different it is. Nothing's completely overgrown from each other. There's a lot more light coming into there as well. So every year in July, we prune the azalea rhododendrons, these ones, and we'll mound them up into balls just to keep them tight, because it's quite an enclosed space in the rock garden. There's a fantastic view from above there, and you can see the real, amazing colours there. So the garden is a real kaleidoscope of colour. That word really describes the garden, kaleidoscope. And you either love it or hate it sometimes. The colours, I didn't really think about what colours went with what. Some areas are so in your face, they look amazing. So we don't generally have to think about colour combinations. Anything works in this garden, which is fantastic. So I'm going to now sweep down through the garden. So moving on from the rock garden, this is a view across the top here, down to the lakes. The lakes are just down here. This picture was taken in the autumn, very early in the morning, and the mist was raising up off the lakes. And it gave it a very a nice feeling that morning. So we head now into the Loderi garden. This is one of the oldest parts of the garden. So this area was first planted up around 1801. So that's the real start of the garden, is around 1801. And it goes through many different stages. So 1801, there was the garden was started to be developed here. In 1840, the Hubbard family really progressed with the garden, so much so that they actually bankrupt themselves, building stone walls and paths, and they put the water supply into the garden as well in 1840. Sadly, it doesn't work anymore. But one really interesting fact is that if you see a small box hedge in the garden, it randomly plays through the woodland. If you delve in, you'll find a water point in there. That's very Victorian. They didn't want to see the workings of the garden, but they wanted water points, but they wanted to cover them up. So they covered them up with box hedging. But this takes you through into the Loderi garden, which is one of the oldest parts of the garden. And then it was heavily planted up by Sir Edmund Loder in 1898. And as I said, he signed up to these collection trips all around the world and started to plant them back in the garden. This is a Loderi rhododendron here. This is Venus. And you know, when this is flowering, you know that the garden's at the height of its flowering. So it normally flowers around the 14th of May. But this year we were around 2 weeks ahead of flowering, just because the winter was so mild here that we're at least 2 weeks ahead. And that's gone through the whole season. We're still 2 weeks ahead of where we should be. So things are flowering a lot earlier this year. But this year has been one of the best years for flowering of rhododendrons across the country. It's been absolutely fantastic. So it's a real shame that we were closed, but they look absolutely spectacular. And the rhododendrons really start flowering. We have some that flower around Christmas time, the winter, and they push on right till the end of June. Some still flower through July as well. So there's a lot of interest through the garden. You can see the paths down through here. About 10 miles of paths were restored across the garden. So there used to be just grass paths and with a small amount of gravel. But the garden never used to be opened all year round. It was only opened in the spring for a couple of weeks in the autumn. But we really kind of made the decision, actually, if we want people to enjoy the garden the whole year round, which is what we wanted, they need to be able to move around the garden safely and be able to access the whole of the garden. So the path network was changed to a gravel, very naturalistic gravel, but it just to allow access the whole year round. Some more of our azalea type rhododendrons through here. This picture really shows how we like to manage the garden. It's managed in a very naturalistic style. So the naturalistic movement was started by William Robinson in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he actually lived in a house and an estate not far from here called Gravetye Manor. So we kind of carry on that thing. It was a real push against the Victorians' bedding schemes. It was a real movement of planting gardens in the most naturalistic style as possible. You can see from this picture that we like bluebells at the edge of the paths. You know, what some people may see as weeds in their gardens, but we leave them. We like foxgloves. We like ferns to naturalize themselves around the garden. So in a way, sometimes it's harder to manage a garden and to look as natural as possible than it is to highly manage a garden. So you went in and weeded just everything out. So we really pick what we leave and what we take out. We want that feeling where people are immersed in the garden and they feel like they are in the Himalayas. It's what we're trying to achieve. So this is some of my favourite rhododendrons through the Loderi garden. This is Rhododendron Macabeanum. This was introduced from China. This is one of the original introductions. This was introduced in the early 1900s and collected by someone called Frank Kingdom Ward. There's about 5 key plant collectors that, around that time, the golden age of plant collecting, who people signed up to their trips, and Sir Edmund Loder signed up to these trips. There's quite a few properties around here. Sussex is famous for its gardens. It's a real hotspot for gardens. So if you love gardens, Sussex is the place to come to see gardens. You know, there's dozens and dozens of fantastic famous gardens in this area. They all swap plants, shared cuttings, and talk to each other. And we still carry on that tradition now. We swap plants and we all meet up and talk to each other and help each other identify plants. Sir Edmund Loder signed up to these collecting trips, and then everybody who signed up got seeds. And this is one of the original seed introductions. This is from China. This is another rhododendron from China. This is Rhododendron Falconeri, and this was collected by someone called Chinese Wilson, who predominantly collected in China. How he got his nickname Chinese Wilson. This is a very large leaf rhododendron. It has huge leaves, and it loves really moist, damp conditions in the shade. But the flowers, you get a flower head like this kind of size. It's a beautiful plant. So these are absolutely fantastic rhododendrons. These are the Loderi rhododendrons, which were bred by Sir Edmund Loder, and he bred these in around 1901, and they've won lots of awards. And what's so unusual about these rhododendrons is they've got very large flowers, but they're scented, and there's not many rhododendrons that are scented. So there's about 20 Loderis, and we have pretty much most of these in the garden. We're still searching around for the odd few others, but we think we've catalogued most of them in the garden. But some of these are very unusual. You won't find them anywhere else, and they've just kind of died out of cultivation. So our plan is to get these microcrops. So you send a small part of the leaf, and it's grown in a laboratory on agar gel, which is made out of seaweed. And then 7 years' time, you get a plant back. And what we want to do is to plant a lot more here, so they don't die out of cultivation. This is another one. This is Loderi King George, which has these beautiful big scented flowers. And the ones here, as I say, are 120 years old now, and they've got huge big stems, which are really nice red bark. And these are predominantly grown through the Loderi garden. So I'm sweeping down out of the Loderi garden, and this is down into the dale. And there's a small stream that runs through here, and there's a lot of old Victorian pipes that run through here, and there's a stream and a set of small ponds down through here. But as the garden became derelict, these had all silted up, and the ponds have silted up now, and the brambles have taken over, and there's a big giant redwood trunk in the middle of the dale here. It's huge. It must be about 1.5 meters across. So what we want to do going forward is to unsilt that small stream and those ponds, and take out those logs and replant this with primulas and other woodland plants. I should have said this is a woodland garden. So we want to install that underplanting of woodland plants to extend interest, but also to cover the ground and protect things and keep moisture into the roots of the rhododendrons. So the garden team has spent many an hour digging out brambles through those areas. Brambles are a big problem. But another weed we have is this here, which, what a beautiful weed to have, I always think. This is Rhododendron luteum. This is a very late deciduous. So some rhododendrons are deciduous. They lose their leaves in the winter. They're later flowering. So these have only really just gone over, and they flower for about 3 weeks. So this yellow one here is Rhododendron luteum, and it's got a beautiful sweet scent to it. So walking around the garden about 3 weeks ago, on the air, you just smelt this fragrance of this rhododendron. But it is a bit of a weed here. It does spread around, and it grows everywhere, and it suckers. So what we do is, at certain clumps, every 5 years, we'll go through and cut them down to the ground and let them come back up again. So, and some areas we dig them out and move them around. But yeah, it can take over if you don't control it. This is a close-up of the flower here. This is one of the best-selling plants that we have in our plant sales in the spring. Everybody will want to take one of these home. Everyone's asking, what's that yellow, what's that fragrant plant? So yeah, it's a big hit in our plant sales. This is another deciduous rhododendron here as well. Again, late flowering. What's so nice about the deciduous ones is they don't have many leaves on them when they flower, and they're a lot shorter as well. So you can really see that it's so bright, this bright orange. And these are down through the dale. Some more of them here, and they're all mostly scented. So it gives that real another kind of aspect to the garden, the scent, the touch, the feel, and the atmosphere. So this is a view. So you sweep down through the dale, you walk up the hill a little bit, and then you get a view from the memorial table right down the middle of the lakes. And this is, some of our views have started to go. Things have kind of grown up and taken over. But really, restoring a garden is getting that balance between what do you put back to was originally there. Should you open up that view that's been lost? So it's getting that balance between going back, you know, doing the research, thinking about what was here, but actually thinking about where the future is going, especially with, you know, climate change, a lot of pests and diseases coming into all countries around the world, but in the UK as well. So a lot of pests and diseases we never had before. So it's really thinking about how we manage the garden for future generations and what we go back to, but what we change. And I think that's one thing about views as well. So this was a view, and that view has started to be lost slightly with the rhododendron overgrowing at the top here. But it's such a beautiful rhododendron, and it's so big, it must be 30 foot high, that I really don't feel we can prune that back. So actually, it's about creating other windows and views through the garden, not always looking back, but also looking forward as well. You sweep down through the dale, and this picture really does show actually when you need to make these tough decisions. A lot of these rhododendrons, as you can see, are quite woody at the bottom, and some of our rhododendrons are 20 foot, 30 foot, 40 foot high, and the flowers are right at the top. So that's why I always say, if you're walking around the garden, don't always look down, look up. Because sometimes the only reason you know a rhododendron is flowering near you is if you see the petals on the ground and you think, well, where is that? Where's that plant? Or just as I'm talking to you, there's an albino wallaby that's just hopped past me on the other side of the lake. And so you've got to make these tough decisions through here. Should this rhododendron be cut down really? And then let it re-sprout up. So we are making those decisions as we go through. And we're working on a management plan of the garden. So we restore, but restore in a very careful and sensitive way. This is a lovely camellia here. This is Camellia Showgirl. We've got a fantastic collection of camellias through the garden as well. And we've got a big collection of winter flowering camellias that come from Japan, the Sasanqua types. And those are the kind of things that we want to build on, those winter flowering camellias, but also looking at other things like we planted 45,000 snowdrops this year across the garden, and we planted another 60,000 early flowering daffodils. So it's you know, we've got great autumn colour, but then it's thinking about interest for the winter as well. But as I said before, really light touches on all of these things as well. But a mass flowering of snowdrops. Look, you come down here in the winter and you just see a field of white. So we want to carry on that. We want to plant another 50,000 snowdrops this year and just have that ongoing interest. So all through the year, people think, yeah, let's go and visit Leonardslee. There's something to see there. So I'm sweeping down now to the lakes. So we've got 7 lakes down in the valley here where I'm sat. And these date back to around the 1500s, some of them. We have New Lake right at the end there. You think the name would suggest it's fairly new, but it's 1740 it was dug. So it's not that new. It's been around for a while. But it gives a real ambience here, and it allows the garden to have that real feeling down here as well. So we've got 7 large lakes running through the middle of the garden, and this picture here shows you this was taken again about 1910 of what the lakes used to look like. We've got a lot of work to do here, replanting all these marginal plants right through the garden. But I don't know if you can see, just at the back here, there's a Japanese bridge, a wooden bridge that goes across the ponds, and I've got a close-up of that as well. And I think, wouldn't it be great to put that bridge back across the lake? I don't know what Penny thinks about that, but I think it'd be fantastic. So I got some pictures here of the lakes that were taken in 2017 when the estate started to be restored. You can see how green they are with all the duckweed there. You can see all the bracken. Big problem with bracken as well. That's one of our major weeds, is bracken here. You've got a lot of birch seedlings that have come in here and seeded themselves, and a lot of sedge grass through here as well. So the lakes had become really constricted, and they needed to be dredged as well. So a number of the lakes have already been dredged. There's work going forward in the future to look at how the water moves through these lakes. Some areas of lakes were widened up, and we've got a lot of work to do with replanting the marginal plants, because without them, the lakes aren't so secure. If we had a really wet winter and a lot of water coming over the tops of the lakes, and it started to wash areas away. So we've got to be really careful on how we manage the lakes, so making sure that they're properly dammed up as well. You can see here how silted this lake here was. So these have been opened up, and they're running through again now. This is a picture of the lake now. So how much clearer it looks. And this is a view right down here. So I'm sat about here on this picture. This was taken a few weeks ago. You can see the luteum in flower. And then this plant here from Brazil is gunnera. It has huge leaves. They're 1.5 meters long. And in the winter, we cut the leaves down and put them over the top of the plant to protect it from the frost. So the engine house is actually just behind me where I'm sat. And this is a picture of when it was taken again in 2017. So what you've got here is all the brambles, the grass path, all the ivy over the engine house here, and all this Rhododendron ponticum, which is a big problem weed. This engine house was built to pump up water to the main house. So the main house is at the top of the hill, just up behind me, and it was used to pump the water up to the main house. It had a big engine inside it, a steam engine, and it was fed. They had to feed it coal in there as well, and the water was pumped up to the main house. But I was doing some research, and I found a story that said that the water was fairly clean, but sometimes they found the odd bug or a twig in the water. So the filters probably didn't work the best. And at the moment, we're just restoring this engine house as well. The roof had started to rot quite badly. So again, these pictures were only taken a few weeks ago. So the roof is now back on, and it's been restored and protected. It was very damp in there as well. And we're actually turning it into a cafe. So when people get right down into the middle of the estate here, they can have some refreshments. And you sit out and look at these beautiful views around the lake here. This is a view of the engine house across. You can see how different. I showed you that picture. All this was completely overgrown all through here. So all that had to be cleared. So there was really 2 years. So the garden was opened again in 2019, April 2019. There was 2 years of just going through and clearing and opening up, which was doing so much hard work to clear the brambles and the nettles and cut down the trees and remove the rhododendrons. And so it's really opened up now. But as I said before, there's a huge amount more work to do of replanting. It's been years since a lot of replanting has been done through the estate. A lot of the plants are the same age, and you're in a real danger of there's a really bad storm, all those old plants coming down at the same time. So it's about managing that and making sure you have different generations of plants through the garden. So again, this is a view down through the lakes. This was taken in the winter. See how much clearer they are. And this was taken in the autumn of the lakes as well. I said before, we've got an amazing autumn colour here. The garden has got beautiful autumn colour. This is a picture of the waterfall. So there's a number of waterfalls which connect each lake, which run with water. But sadly, in the summer, if it's really, really dry, those as the lake levels drop, those dry up. So we have a plan to put a big pump in, so water constantly flows around the lakes and allows those water features to constantly run. I mean, we haven't had proper rain probably here now for 8 weeks or so, but it's still running because we had such a wet winter. There's still water in the course because our lakes are fed by water upstream. There's fantastic bluebells here. There's hills full of bluebells, which flower in May, and they looked absolutely fantastic this year. But these are some of the snowdrops that we've been planting. As I said, we planted around 45,000 snowdrops. So we planted we planted the native British species, Nivalis, which has got a beautiful, just single flower snowdrop. Again, it's really keeping that naturalistic style. We want it to be as natural as possible if we're going to introduce anything instead. So the bluebells are native bluebells, and we wanted to make sure that we carried on that thing. And then we have another one called Elwesii, which is a bigger snowdrop. But yeah, they were all planted by hand. We didn't use any machinery. So I think after about 2 or 3 weeks, the garden team, I think, had seen enough of the snowdrop bulbs. But they, you know, when they came down and saw them flowering, they were really pleased with their work. This is a big problem, this rhododendron here. It looks beautiful when it's in flower, has a really nice purple flower, but it really does get out of hand. And this rhododendron was introduced again in the Victorian times to plant on big estates to hide birds, grouse and pheasants for shoots, give them cover. But it's completely got out of hand. And it poisons the soil around it, and it's very difficult to get rid of. So we have a program of reducing a lot of this ponticum and replanting up areas as well. So it takes over, it just swamps everything. And again, this is a picture of the garden in the autumn. This is Acer palmatum, and you can just see how much autumn color is here. This is a really beautiful Acer here. Yeah, so we've got fallow deer, which roam freely through the estate, and then we've got some of the wallabies. There's around 40 to 50. It's difficult to know how many that are wild throughout the estate. And then we have a nursery enclosure for some of the wallabies as well, and that's where the joeys are born. And we've got 4 joeys that were born this year, so the baby wallabies. But what I didn't mention is there's a huge amount of wildlife through this estate. There's kingfishers, a lot of birds of prey, there's owls and bats. So it's a real haven for wildlife. So whatever we do, we really respect the environment here and look after the wildlife as much as possible.
Stephen, thank you so much. It was an incredible presentation, and to see you actually sitting outside there at Leonardslee when we're sitting in the dark here has been a wonderful experience. Thank you so much. And Penny, all the best with all your incredible initiatives